the sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams. Even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home, coming home. We're coming home, coming home. Even the sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams. Even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home. We're coming home. We're coming home. Coming home. The table is set. I will sit down, surrounded by friends and feast. The table is set. We will sit down, surrounded by friends and feast. Even the sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams. Even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home. We're coming home. We're coming home. Coming home. We're coming home. We're coming home. We're coming home. We're coming home. Coming home. The table is set. We will sit down, surrounded by friends.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with a Messiah complex. A Messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. A hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest. Treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river. Dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us. Baptized in ball pits. A clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, Don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers. See what I say, just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. I think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
Ken knew happy, though. Great Ken knew happy, and I can rejoice about that.
Although this world will devastate you, and rejoice although this world will penetrate you, and rejoice although you will not survive. Rejoice you'll never make it out alive.
Excellent rehearsal, gentlemen.
And rejoice, your hair, it smells like burning hair. Oh, rejoice, your nails all got chewed off. Oh, rejoice, and holy fuck, you're bleeding there. Oh, rejoice, you burn your whole beard off. Rejoice, despite the fact that the world will hurt you. And rejoice despite the fact this world will kill you. And rejoice despite the fact this world will tear you to shreds. Rejoice because you're trying your best.
Hey, I love that one. That's gorgeous. Thank you, brother. Who's that, brother?
All right. Welcome to the Friday live stream. Haven't done it for a little while because I was on vacation for 3 weeks. We have Midwestary coming up in just 2 weeks. And so I was discussing with Sam about the possibility of doing more conversation with a bunch of the people who are going to be there, both the people on stage and the people who are going to be participating. And so we've put a group together this morning, kind of last minute, but I'm really glad it came together. I'm going to bring them in. Well, I'm going to bring Sam in first because Sam doesn't really need any introduction. Everybody knows Sam.
Aren't I the least well-known guest on this stream? Not the most well-known, but I appreciate that.
I don't know. Maybe you are the least well-known, but it depends on the matrix and the context. So
Sure.
At least everybody in this corner knows who you are, Sam. What a difference from how many years ago did you first contact me and we did that one recording?
It was 2019. So and 6 years.
Yeah. The sound was so terrible, and you came out as a biblical Unitarian, and claws came out from some people. And
I'm just being true to my inner secret, sacred self.
All right, we've worked through that. The next person I'm going to bring on probably needs some introduction, but not a lot to some people. This is Annie Crawford. Welcome to the channel, Annie.
Hey, Paul. Thanks so much. It's great to see you live in person for the first time. This is really fun.
Annie has been following the channel for a while, and she did a course at the Symbolic World, and we've been trying to get her on to do a rando, but that hasn't happened yet. But I didn't want to get that in the way of her participating in this, because when Sam and I started talking about this, I didn't know how many people were going to be able to get together today. So I thought Annie would be a great person to have on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Annie?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. So I'm a classical educator. I homeschooled my kids, and out of that work developed kind of a broader, secondary career educating other people's kids. So I teach great books courses, integrated humanities courses for high schoolers, leading them from Genesis and Homer to Plato to Dante, all the way up to the modern world. And then I'm also a cultural apologist, which is kind of this new branch of apologetics coming out of really Lewis studies, the work of Michael Ward and Holly Ordway. And what a cultural apologist tries to do is look at the way that our embodied cultural context shapes what we believe, and then reciprocally how our ideas and our beliefs then shape culture. And so this kind of reciprocal relationship between ideas and embodied reality, how that has, worked through the history of the church so that we can have insight and wisdom and how to respond to our world now, how to share, the gospel in a way that, not just making rational arguments, but how do we share who Christ is in a way that makes imaginative sense to people, cultural sense. And so really, when I found Pajot, I thought he's doing way more successfully what all of us in this program are doing. And so I really have enjoyed his work and getting the chance to work with him at Symbolic World.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Annie. Next person I'm going to bring on is Rod Dreher. Doesn't need a lot of introduction. He's been on the channel a couple of times. I would say if anyone is responsible for, if someone in the Christian Reformed Church wants to blame someone for the trajectory my career has taken over the last 10 years, I think it's Rod Dreher. A lot of people blame Jordan Peterson, but before I ever found Peterson, I found you, and I started reading your blog, and that rearranged some things for me. So,
well, that's an honor. Thank you so much. And I was actually afraid I wasn't going to get here. I've been on vacation this week in Sardinia, this magical island in the Mediterranean. I have some good Christian friends there, and one of them is Italian. He has a little condo, and I went to the beach. And but it's not so easy to travel in Europe in the summer because all of Europe is on the move in August. So had a little train difficulty, but I made it, and I'm so glad to be here.
All right. Well, thank you, Rod. And Rod is one of our stage speakers for the Midwestuary coming up in a couple of weeks. And apologize already, Rod, for having to endure transatlantic travel. It's not.
Yeah, we should probably tell your listeners who don't know, I live in Budapest in Hungary. So it's just past 7 p.m. here.
All right. So he is in the prime of his day. And although Chad the girl dad might join us in a little bit, our other guest needs likely zero introduction on this channel, our good friend John Vervaeke. And thank you, John, for being able to make this morning, or this afternoon for you.
My pleasure, Paul. Hi,
so
Sam.
Hi, John.
So for how many of you is this your first experience of the estuary protocol?
Me.
All right. So at least
Annie
two of
and
you.
me.
All right. So what I do on my Friday live streams, generally speaking, are estuary style conversations. And what does that mean? Well, there's a protocol that sort of helps us get into a conversation. And some of you might know that John Van Donk and I came up with this thing, and we've been working it. And there are all these little estuary groups all around the world. It's a very open protocol, and it goes like this. The first round we've sort of done, that's introductions. The second round is going to be pitching. We're going to pitch an idea to start the conversation for the group. And the idea, it can be an idea, it can be something intellectual, a thought you've been thinking. It can, here he is. Well, let's see. There he is. He's got the beard and the dickies on. My goodness. So and Chad knows this full well. Chad has run many estuary groups himself. So when you pitch an idea, it can be something intellectual, it can be something contextual, something that's going on in your immediate surroundings, maybe at work, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your nation. It can be something personal, something that you've been you're wrestling with, and it's appropriate to share, maybe get feedback from the group. Or it can be something estuarial. It can be something about the group. And because most of these Friday groups are sort of one-offs, unlike my Sunday morning estuary at church, where it's mostly the same people every week, then they can talk about the group if they want to. So that's the second round is pitch. And the third round is point. Now, the key thing to remember during the second round is you have to pay careful attention to what everyone else is saying, because in the third round, you're going to need to point to an idea that your salience landscaper caught and tell us why. And it should be somebody else's idea, not your idea, because we already know you're interested in that, but the idea that another person has put on the virtual table here. And as we go around that round, and it's also okay to combine ideas and say, boy, Sam said this and then Annie said that. And that's there's sort of an intersection between those two that grabbed me. And so that third round will go around pointing at the ideas that are on the table and saying, well, I liked this one. Now, as the host, I will usually get annoyed if someone says, I like them all the same. And I will say, they are not your children. I need a hierarchy here. Pick one that grabbed you the most, because then I sort of tally up where the group has gone. And usually by the end of the third round, we're ready to hit the fourth round, which isn't really a round at all. It's just open conversation, which is play. So it's introduce. I still haven't gotten a P word for that. It's pitch, point, play. And so Sam, who is a veteran of this, Sam,
I was kind of hoping you wouldn't ask me first. But
it is legitimate in the first round to pass, if you will. We have a small group, but you may pass if you want to. But Sam, you get to throw out the first pitch.
I'll do some. I'll pitch something. I also just want to say, most people don't know that Chad is actually the one who got the ball rolling on the Midwestary conference. Some people might have the false impression that I got the ball rolling, but I just want to make sure that Chad gets the credit where he is due. So he's the idea man, and I have the fun job of making sure that those plans come to fruition. So I just wanted to make sure that the record let that be known. And I want to thank John and Rod for agreeing to be our speakers. And it's in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today is the beginning of the conference. So if you are a procrastinator and have not bought your ticket, there is still time. There are still tickets for sale. So that was.
But every day the price gets higher, so buy them today.
Well, we made the price. I could make the price higher if I want to. I've raised the price once. Be scared I won't raise it again. Just to get you guys to buy your tickets sooner. I mean, I would say my pitch, maybe this is too abstract, but we'll save that for the pointing round, is I'm still trying to figure out what we even mean by spirit nowadays. And I feel like once upon a time, spirit used to actually mean a concrete particular thing that was sort of it was something that was in the world that you couldn't see, right? Like when Jesus says, you see the wind blowing, but you don't know from where it comes. Although the wind, the word wind is actually spirit, right? When he says those born of spirit are spirit, right? And then he says, you see the spirit blow, but you don't know, right? Wind and spirit were the same word. It was a word for something that had powerful activity in the world, especially in people, but that you couldn't see. But you could see the effects of it. Like you can see the effects of trees, leaves rippling on trees, but you can't see the wind that causes the trees to move. And I feel like spirit has been demoted to something like a metaphor for psychological reality in our current imagination, that we think psychology is sort of the real brass tacks when we talk about spirit, and that spirit is some sort of analogy, metaphor, cushy, old-fashioned word to talk about something, but the reality is, neurons firing. And I'm wondering if we can still mean something real, if spirit can get back to its old place in the ontology where it means something as brass tacks real as neurons and psychology and stuff like that. So that's something that's my pitch for the story round.
Very good, Sam. Very good, Sam. Annie, do you have a pitch that you'd like to make?
Well, providentially, perhaps a spirit is descending upon us, because that is precisely the topic that I have been mulling over, especially after listening to Paul, your video clips of John Vervaeke, like your story of your interactions with Hermes is so fascinating, right? And so much of what we are all doing in this corner is trying to reconstruct a coherent cosmology, right? We've had that modern dualism where everything's reducible to the material, or maybe we admit a kind of pure spiritual realm, but how the two integrate, we don't know. And so we're wrestling with how to reconstruct this integrated cosmology that gives room for these intermediate spirits. What do we even mean by spirit? I'm just constantly thinking about that, and it came up again for me just listening to that conversation with you, John. So my pitch is the same as Sam's, I guess.
All right. Just a warning on the second round. It is not you can pitch what someone else has pitched, but that's the third round is good. So if you have something different that adds to the flavor, Rod, do you have anything you'd like to pitch this morning? What's on your mind?
Well, it's I feel a little funny about this because it aligns with what Sam and Annie said, but maybe it's different significantly. I'll tell you what it is. I recently went to Chartres in France to write a story for the Free Press about the annual pilgrimage that 20,000 young traditionalist Catholics, mostly French, but also from all over Europe and even some from North America, they take a 3-day walking tour from Paris to the cathedral in Chartres over the weekend. They camp along the way, they pray together, they sing hymns, and it all concludes with a traditional Latin Mass in the cathedral. Now, with 20,000 people, you can't get them all in the cathedral, but so they're all surrounding the cathedral. I went there as a journalist to find out what attracts people. The average age, I think, was 19, to spend 3 days walking and camping and praying together. And what I found was so inspiring to me. I'm very pessimistic as a Christian about our culture, and most of my work has to do with how do we preserve what we have and rebuild on what we have in liquid modernity. But these kids, man, they were just incredible. They all when I asked them why you're there, it was all some version of we're seeking meaning, we're seeking purpose, we're seeking community and transcendence and a connection to our roots. And they believe they could find it by this ritual, this 3-day pilgrimage culminating in this Latin Mass. I found it really, really moving because I think I could see if they were being joyful in a happy, clappy church camp way. No, I think they really got it. After that, I went with a journalist friend down to visit René Camus, who is one of the most controversial intellectuals in France. And I asked him in the interview I did, I said, General de Gaulle in his memoirs said that he always had a certain idea of France. What is your idea of France? And he got a little bit indignant, but in a comedic way. And he said, France is not an idea. France is castles. France is cathedrals. France is places. And he just starts naming things, art and music. And I put 2 and 2 together there. And I said, maybe this is the answer. Maybe we need to help Christians and others who are caught in this what John Vervaeke calls a meaning crisis. We need to reconnect them, their spiritual convictions or religious convictions, with actual people and places and historical things. There was an American Catholic priest I interviewed there who was guiding a group of high school boys from Philadelphia. And they had been at a traditional Catholic monastery in Fontainebleau the week before they went to Chartres. And he said, these boys are just blown away by it. He said, you're seeing these boys wake up at 4 a.m. to participate in the chants of the monks. And he said, they are so overwhelmed by beauty. I've never seen anything like it. And the priest said, I kind of feel like we spend too much time in catechesis and not enough time reflecting on the beauty that comes out of the gospel. So this is also how I discovered the works of John Vervaeke, and all of this is going into my next book project. So the thing I would like to talk about is what role does rediscovering material culture, the art, the music, the material manifestations of Christianity across the centuries, what role might that play in revitalizing the church today and even building on Christianity, rebuilding it and helping solve the meaning crisis for people in the West whose ancestral religion is Christianity.
All right. Thank you, Rod. Very good. John, do you have something you'd like to pitch to us?
Well, largely triggered by what Rod said. What's pressing in my mind right now, pressing on my heart, is I've just returned from a first leg of the pilgrimage that I've been undertaking, the Philosophical Silk Road, in which person, place, and presence, the presence of a legacy of a sage, are all interacting. And this has made me reflect more on pilgrimage. Rod, you'll see how this converges with you in some ways, but I think it's different as well. So I think I can keep Paul happy while still converging with you. We'll see if I can make it work. So part of what's going on is this idea that we have this word theory, which is our propositional explanation, and then behind it this older idea, which is theoria, which we've learned is perspectival, it's contemplative. But the work of Nightingale and Ward show that there's a deeper, older meaning to theoria, which is precisely pilgrimage. And the idea that if we want to get down to the deepest, of course, we need the contemplative, the mindfulness. John Vervaeke will never deny that. But we need more properly what pilgrimage does. And for me, the pilgrimage, it links two things. Charles Taylor, who is a brilliant Canadian philosopher, and I'll always wave the Canadian flag, especially right now when I'm going to be venturing down to the hostile world of the United States, and Canadian academic crossing the border and perhaps waylaid and held for 3 or 4 days while I miss the conference. We'll see. But anyways, I don't like his name for what he talks about, but so I have a different name. But his basic idea is, if you're trying to argue with somebody and you're not arguing about this specific theory, but you're trying to deal with a framework like the framework of modernity, you can't argue with them. You can't argue with them propositionally. It's not going to work. What you have to do is you have to move them to a different place, a different perspective, give them a different persona, much like an anthropologist moving to a different culture. And then they put on different glasses, and then they look back and they can see the limitations and the prejudices and what they were blinded to in the previous perspective. And then and this is what a pilgrimage does. You're doing this, and you're looking back. And then you do multiples of these, and not only are you looking back individually, you start to look back, and you get this through line of looking back, and you start to get this very significant change. And how that was showing up for me, and I think it's what Rod is talking about, and which kept coming up in how I was engaging with my interlocutors was, but this isn't an abstract conceptual thing, this theoria. It is a way. I was privileged to read a masterpiece of a book, Renewing the Senses by Wynne, the philosophy and theology of the spiritual life. And he talks about that when you go through this, what I call a metanoetic passage, right? This pilgrimage, you start to see the world in a fundamentally different way, and you start to become a different person. And for me, sorry, I'm almost to my point. This goes towards the thing that is most central to me in connection to pilgrimage as this metanoetic passage, which is the proposal that the West needs to recover the idea of theosis. Because what happens in that fundamental change in seeing and being is which has been traditionally, all the way back to Irenaeus, God became man so that man can become God. And that keeps getting repeated through all the church fathers and passed along for a very long time. What does this theosis mean? Because what I'm proposing is that theosis, which is arrived at through pilgrimage of some kind, whether it's imaginal or actual, is our analog for moksha or satori, that it is within our Western tradition what we can recover that will allow us to enter into deep dialogue with Vedanta or with Zen, for example. So what's uppermost in my mind right now is what would it mean to enable people to undergo pilgrimage so that they start to aspire towards theosis? That's what's uppermost in my mind.
Okay. Thank you, John. I appreciate the fact that Luke is trying to help me host this group from the live round, but I'll insist we're still in round 2. Chad, do you have something to pitch?
Yes. Outstanding pitches thus far. I'm blown away. I don't know if my mic is working well, but
turn it up a little bit if you got some volume, but we can't hear you.
Okay. You can. Okay. Hello. Is that better? Whatever. All right. So here's my pitch. I think it's contextual. I've been doing actually a little bit of my own pilgrimage through history, through books, and a lot of this is prompted by becoming a father and just being kind of growing interest in the world that I'm living in, this long journey. So that's the context of my pilgrimage through history and things like this, trying to understand things. I want to be a good father. I want to be the kind of father that when I leave this place or I move on to the next realm, whatever that means, that my daughter will have enjoyed her time with me. And so that's the context. Sorry. The pitch is wrestling with the subtle and explicit, sometimes hidden, compounded context of personal growth and decay as it relates to contemporary historical, familial, and even mythical realities of life, and trying to glean some general principles of unity and sanity to discern mercy and grace and sacrifice and peace, and trying to recognize and express gratitude for the privilege and burden of givenness, which is a bunch of bullshit that I wrote down to try to say, I don't know, how to live properly in life. And, I think I have some ideas, but I mean, all you have to do is talk to people for 5 seconds and be like, how the hell does that guy have those crazy ideas? And then he'll say the same about me. And it's like trying to not destroy the world that we're in. I mean, all you got to do is go through history and see how close people were to contributing to something magnificent, and then they just blow it up because they're fucking idiots, like we are. And so that's what I'm thinking about. So pardon my language. Sorry, Paul. Sorry. That's my pitch.
All right. Thank you, Chad. I was going to pitch, but I usually pass. I'm going to pass. And we'll go right to the third round. Sam, point to somebody else's pitch that grabbed you and why.
I'll point to sort of a mixture of Rod and John of theosis through pilgrimage, and a little bit of a dash of what Chad was talking about how do we become the people that we want to be, with maybe a sprinkling of what does the Holy Spirit have to do with that process as well. But I think that, theosis through pilgrimage sounds like a great topic.
Okay, very good. Annie, what would you like to point to?
Well, my mind is always working to try and integrate, right? To perceive the unifying theme that's emerging. And one thing I didn't mention in my intro is, C.S. Lewis for me is kind of the figure that unifies so much of what I try to do. And in what you were saying, John, about this pilgrimage as theosis, I mean, that resonates throughout Narnia with Lewis's whole idea of further up and further in. And I think so much of our modern confusion comes from the impact of print culture, right? So if we think, I'm trying to pull a lot of these ideas together. Because, are y'all familiar with a book called Metaphors We Live by George Lakoff?
I have published several articles criticizing that work. Yes.
Have you?
Good.
Okay, well, interesting. But I do think, this also, so trying to connect to what Rod, you're saying about the material significance, the role of materiality in renewing the church and addressing the meaning crisis. What you're saying, John, about the way that movement through landscapes opens up epistemological possibilities, right? Both of those are connecting to this idea that our understanding is rooted in our embodied reality, that it is through metaphors, through physical, we're incarnate beings, and it's through physical experiences that we know. That's just our primary mode of knowledge. And this was very important to Lewis. This really frames so much of the way that he thinks about the role of the imagination. And so this idea that our incarnational space is part of how we understand the world that we live in, and paying attention to that in order to open up possibilities of moving further up, further in, right, toward theosis. Let me think there's so much here to pull together for a second. So I'm really interested, I guess, in that connection point. Incarnation, metaphor as an incarnational principle that can help us better understand this idea of pilgrimage. Because back to the print culture. Thank you. I found my thought. Forgive me. Print culture teaches us to think in static ways, right? I want to nail down on the page the propositional truth. I want to understand, is this right or is this wrong? Or is this good or is this bad? And Lewis points this out in Mere Christianity. We have to account for time as one of the fundamental dimensions through which we know the world, right? And so this accounting of time in our understanding, I think, is really important. So like I think of, your conversation, or John, your experiences with Hermes, let's say, right? So that's going to make a lot of Christians uncomfortable. Oh, this other intermediate spirit. Is this good? Is this bad? We forget to consider the dimension of time. Well, is this particular context or landscape in which I'm in, this epistemological landscape, let's say, am I moving through that landscape further up, further in, or am I moving through that landscape in a way that's retreating, withdrawing? The direction of movement is something we have to account for in our understanding of things. And I think we don't often do that. So I'm sorry that that's not maybe pulling together in a very helpful way, but that's what y'all have me thinking about with your proposals.
That's all right, Annie. I can score that one. That's okay. That's better than I like them all the same. Rod, what would you like to point to in terms of what someone else put on the table?
Well, I especially like John's idea of pilgrimage as a way of theosis. And, I became an Orthodox Christian 20 years ago. And I learned as an Orthodox Christian a couple of things that are relevant here. First of all, the idea of theosis, which is to say our journey through life as Christians is to become in-Godded. I think that's one of the Inklings said that, but it is to become more and more filled with the Holy Spirit, so we become more like God. That is what theosis is. It's a process. It's a lifelong process. Now, another thing that I learned from practicing Orthodoxy is something that John has called participatory knowing. Mm-hmm. That is to say, it really shook me out of my very Western, very modern Western mindset of thinking that knowledge is what you think, and only what you think. And in fact, there are ways of knowing that can only happen through the body. And my journey in Orthodoxy has helped me understand this. And reading John recently, as I'm trying to understand why it matters so much to go on pilgrimage, to understand what was driving these young people, that's very important. Now, Zygmunt Bauman, a Marxist sociologist, came up with a really important concept called liquid modernity. And we can get into it later in the discussion. Maybe I don't want to delay this round with it. But anyway, he says this is the time that we're in now. It is a time that has turned a people that used to be pilgrims into tourists. The difference being a pilgrim knows where he's headed, or at least has a specific goal in mind. He's going on this journey. It's a linear journey in community with others. They will pass through different familiar landmarks, but they will get there. They can measure their progress. A tourist, on the other hand, let me back up a little. The pilgrim, it's a journey of meaning. The tourist, on the other hand, is free to go wherever he or she wants, driven only by his desires, which is to say, when he gets bored, he just moves on, and there's no rhyme or reason. We are all tourists in today's world, and we need to learn how to be pilgrims. Last point, a great Canadian scholar, Northrop Frye, said in his study of C.S. Eliot, the first line is something like, Americans, when they go to Europe, are always surprised to discover how the roots of so much of what we, North Americans at least, understand as true and valuable have its roots. These things have their roots in Europe. And this is something I've really discovered in a very powerful way in the last 4 years living over here. And this is why pilgrimages to cathedrals, visiting shrines that meant something to people, to Christians 1,000 years ago, and have meant something up until basically the day before yesterday. Why I want to figure out a way to help my generation and the younger generations discover why that's important. And the reason I'm connecting this to what John Vervaeke says is because I'm learning so much from reading John about why this is not just an interesting idea from a theological or sociological perspective, but why it also matters to our cognitive sense. In other words, what is it about the way we are made up as human beings that make participatory learning so important to us? And what have we cut ourselves off from in modernity by doing what Ian McGilchrist calls living in the left brain?
Okay, thank you, Rod. John, now you're sort of winning the tally, so you have a difficult thing there. You have to point to somebody else's idea. What would you? I
thought you could self-point. I thought
self-pointing. No, you can. You expose yourself as a narcissist if you self-point.
Self-pointing is a mortal sin.
In Chicago, we allow self-pointing, but maybe
you don't follow the protocol in Chicago, Sam. We know you're heretics, but
I don't want to get involved in this religious dispute, so I'll just follow what Paul said. I want to point to something that Annie did, and I want to make clear that I don't criticize their discovery of the phenomena of conceptual metaphor. It's part of the whole family of the imaginal, like gesture and figurative speech and things like that. I object to their Humean explanation of the cognitive processes. So I just want to make clear that you're invoking the phenomenon. I'm completely in line with that. I just object to their cognitive science about the phenomenon, which I think is very poorly done.
I'll have to reread that. That sounds really interesting. Thank you.
It's too bottom up. They're too rapidly empiricist. There's not enough top down going on, and metaphors are simultaneously bottom up and top down. So that's just the gist of the argument. What I wanted to point to in what Annie said, it does align with a lot of work I've done, obviously on 4E, being embedded, enacted, extended, evolving, and emotional. I do the 6Es, exaptive. She was talking a lot about the incarnational, the our incarnation and our moving through time and space as central to our cognition. Barbara Tversky has written a great book on that, Mind in Motion, about all that sort of thing. And I've done a lot of work around that too. But for me, she brought out something. I'm kind of pointing to myself, but I could point to Rod too on this. There's a deep, I mean, the formula has a relationship between theosis and incarnation. You can't, and then they both say something to our embodiment. And the idea, part of it is, God becomes man so that man can become God. That's incarnation and theosis. But the idea is Jesus's incarnation never severs him from his divinity. And in reciprocation, our deification never separates us from our humanity, our finitude, our embodiment, our embeddedness, our enacted. And so I'm actually also very interested in that. What is the relationship between this, I'll use the standard metaphor, ascent, right, of theosis, more up and in, as you said, and also our obligation to recognize that we can never transcend such that we escape our finitude. We will never, that theosis never means any kind of escape. So this is the anti-Gnosticism, any kind of escape from our humanity, and trying to hold those two together. And I think if I understand, and I don't claim to understand it near as well as perhaps Rod does. So Rod, if I'm wrong on this, just correct me. But there seems to be there is this relationship between the incarnation and theosis that has to properly be understood. And both of those say something about our embodiment, which is that we're finite, but capable of transcendence. That's what I'm pointing to. That's not just pointing to what I previously said.
Okay. Thank you, John. Chad, what would you like to point to?
Well, I don't. Can you hear me now? Because is it
We hear you
working
fine.
better?
You're doing fine. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
clear.
Excellent. Most excellent. Well, I like them all equally, and I think that they are all pointing to the same thing, which is very clear to me. I don't, it's actually very much it's what is spirit, and I think what is spirit as it relates to the pilgrimage and theosis are just like that just makes the most sense to me. I mean, it's like that's it. That's what I want to point to.
All right. I'm going to point to Chad. I'll tell you, Chad. I mean, there's a lot of strong ideas on the table, but when you talked about being a father and sort of wrap that into what obviously has won the tally, because in many ways, once you bring a child into the world and part of what's been beautiful about the corner for me is that we're not just a group of people talking about ideas, because we're people. And like John just said, we don't leave our humanity behind. And, Chad, your story, when those who caught some of the pre-branding that I played Chad's poem, which I play probably as much as anything out there, because that poem so grabs onto the loss that so many have experienced. And I think that gets at when Rod sees a massive number of younger people doing what I think would be unintelligible to some of their parents, that they have decided they're, of all things, going to do a pilgrimage. People don't know that right before I met John Van Donk, John Van Donk went to do that pilgrimage it's the Pilgrimage of Santiago. That pilgrimage, it's become quite popular since the movie, but Van Donk did that, and he was all high on that when he came into CRC Voices, and that's how I first met John Van Donk. And from that came the estuary and, of course, many of the other things. But Chad, your story of that poem of you as a young boy, you so beautifully, I'll play it at the end of the live stream too. If you didn't catch it at the beginning, you can catch it at the end. You just sensed something, then your family shattered, your parents divorced, and you've shared so much of your story, and, struggling with substance abuse, tasting sobriety through 12 steps, and then going to a little Lutheran church in a town in Wisconsin with a funny name, being married. It's no longer Chad the alcoholic. Now it's the Chad the girl dad. And every now and then on your little live stream, you'll be there with your daughter. Key in one of the things that Jesus brings to the conversation is this metaphor in the Old Testament, which is there, but Jesus raises it and elevates it, of the Father. And of course, in Luke 15, the parable of the prodigal son, that really comes through. And the Father, just this poignant image of the Father waiting for the lost son. And if you look at the work of Kenneth Bailey, of sort of trying to understand Luke 15 in the context of a first century Jewish village, knowing that the village elders were going to intercept that lost son and exile him from the village. And so the father has to watch and has to run and has to preempt the exclusion of the son with the horrendously audacious and offensive act of throwing his robe around him and shodding him and killing the fatted calf. And so, Chad, I guess many of the other things tickled my brain, and my brain likes to be tickled, but you touched my heart. So you get my vote. You get my vote, Chad. But yeah, John, you really sort of grabbed us with Pilgrimage as a way of theosis in conjunction with Rod's observation, and also your connecting it to place. So when I look at, let's say, Chad's story of becoming a father and now having a daughter, and the rest of us here know Annie, and I really only know Annie sort of through Twitter, but the rest of us here know personally what becoming a parent, how that changes us. And, it changes us in ways that we struggle to describe. And in some ways, it, I think, brings us into the story that Jesus, accents. Jesus, of course, if you read the Gospel of John, he's the Son, he's the Son, he's the Son. And so let's keep going with Theosis and Pilgrimage.
Paul, can I add on a little bit to what you said that will connect to Theosis?
Sure.
Chad, as someone who serves home-based families, I work with a lot of families, and I know so many families who are feeling the difficulty of our incarnational context, which is this liquid modernity, right? That so much about our culture feels like, a surrealist painting that's dripping down, or like a pile of dry sand, and here we are as you become a parent, and all of a sudden then your pilgrimage becomes not just individual, but generational, right? So as a parent, I'm trying to build for my family a coherent, meaningful life amidst liquid modernity, and begin for them a kind of generational pilgrimage further up and further in toward our divine home. While it's like, I think a lot about, it's like trying to build a sandcastle with dry sand. It keeps slipping, and it's so much work to try and hold together some little meaningful structure. And what helps me, and what I try to encourage our parents, is to think of this in the heroic mode. This is heroic work, good work, worthy of being sung by a great bard for families in our particular context to form and forge some kind of incarnationally meaningful, coherent life. it's hard. It's tear-jerkingly hard. Like I teared up as y'all were speaking because I feel it, and I feel it in my family. But that's the sacred work. And if we can have that kind of heroic perspective toward that work, and then communities like this where we can, celebrate and sustain that work. Anyway, so maybe I just want to tack on to giving attention to what Chad's saying and the way that it fits into Theosis, not just as an individual pilgrimage, but as a generation, as a familial, as a, we are bound together as a human people. It's a journey we're on together.
Well, what's interesting about that is something I brought up a lot in my work is an observation made by Paul Connerton, who was an anthropologist at Cambridge University. He died a few years ago. But he wrote a book called How Societies Remember. And in the book, I think he was a Marxist, so he didn't have any religious skin in the game. But he set out to examine individual small traditional societies and to figure out how those who had held on to their traditions and ways of life in against the scattering forces of modernity, how had they done it? And he said that he discerned that they had a few things in common. One, they had a sacred story that told them who they were and what they were to do, and that they held in common. Second, they celebrated the sacred story in an unvarying ritual. Third, when they celebrated this ritual, they all had a sense that in some mysterious way, it connected them with transcendence. It took them out of time and connected them to the future and to the past, to eternity. And fourth, and I found this the most interesting, they used their bodies in celebrating this ritual because, in this lovely phrase Connerton used, it sediments the sacred story into their bones. Mm-hmm. Now, I first read those words around 2015, 2016, but they've stayed with me since then. And it has helped me to understand a way out of liquid modernity. I don't think there's any way to escape it. We have to go through it. And all of my work since the Benedict option and going forward has been about trying to find ways to build arcs that will allow us to float on top of liquid modernity without being sunk. And until we can find in the future, which we'll probably never live to see, our descendants will live to see, a place of landing, following the Noah's Ark story. But for me, one of the things that I got in thinking about this so much from reading John Vervaeke's work recently is this.
Rod, just call me John, please.
Okay, sorry. Herr Professor Dr. Vervaeke.
No, don't do that.
In reading John's work recently, just this urge that seems to be inside all of us towards transcendence, that there's something that it seems irrepressible, and sometimes people can take it in a bad way. I mean, this is where totalitarianism came from. Mm-hmm. Hannah Arendt wrote about how, in studying how totalitarianism took over in Russia and Germany, these people were they were completely atomized and lonely. They had lost faith in hierarchies and traditions. They had gotten to a place where they only wanted to accept as true things that felt right to them. And so we're in real trouble. Just today on the train ride back from Vienna, I was texting with a senior British journalist friend of mine, and he said that there is a growing awareness among the elites of the country that they could be on the verge of fascism. Now, the journalist he's a conservative, and he means this very seriously. I brought this thing up with him when I said that I'd met a young Englishman at a conference recently, and he said that I think that things are so broken in our country that the only thing that will fix it is fascism, and I'm ready for it. And the journalist said, you'd be surprised at the number of people higher up who see this as a problem. Well, the journalist doesn't want this to happen either, but we can all see that this is coming from somewhere. It's not that people just wake up one day and say, I would like to see some version of Mussolini or Hitler take over. It's based out of fear of chaos and violence and people looking for a solution to it. Well, I think it's a false solution. But the problem is very real, and it ultimately goes back to the crisis of meaning that John has talked about.
Okay, Chad.
Yeah, I'm glad you had mentioned that the idea that the liquid modernity is not something that you're going to like it shouldn't be
Escape.
thought that escape, right? I mean, because like I think that's the mistake that the like you mentioned the Marxists and whatever happened with the communism and how they, you know, they rejected their tradition and they kind of fell into this other thing. And it's like, well, if we do the same thing, I think if we try to reject liquid modernity, we fall into another kind of a trap. And I think like one of the things that if Paul talked about the poem, one of the things that prompted that poem was I had still been struggling with things that I had been dealing with since I was a kid, and there are things that aren't just going to go away. And like one of the things that we talk about in recovery is we will not regret the past nor to shut the door on it. And so like I sometimes I think when I am surfing in the attention economy of YouTube, I hear the things like, oh, modernity and liquid modernity bad. And it's like, yeah, but like I don't know, man. I don't know exactly what it means. First of all, so I don't know what it means exactly.
Well,
I have to
I
look
can
more
tell
into
you.
it.
Should we define this because what Bauman meant by liquid modernity is he said that in the early modern period, the rate of change, cultural and social change, began to accelerate with the rise of science and technology and
Yes.
the advent of capitalism and so on and so forth. And but time moved slowly enough culturally for people to get used to certain forms of living. But in the reason modernity became liquid is the rate of change became so fast that it would change before new forms could even solidify. And so people end up with chaos because things are just moving. The rate of change is so fast. That's all he means by
Yeah.
it.
No, okay, now I get that because like I thought a lot about, and that was in my prompt too. It's like this because it's hard to like try and frame like the struggle. What am I going through here? Like I'm I don't even know like what I'm missing as far as the historical context goes or traditional context. I mean, I know I could read things and like get something like an image of what it is, but like do I really know how disconnected from tradition and heritage and all this stuff? Because yeah, look at modernity. But like um yeah, I don't think it'd be wise to like how do you integrate the liquid modernity and stay tethered to something like, and I think it's humility. I don't know. I don't know. I don't. Anyways, sorry. I, I can get off. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Good, John.
Yeah, liquid modernity. Hartmut Rosa talks about frenetic stability, that we have to work harder and harder, not just so we don't fall behind. This comes with ever increasing nostalgia and FOMO, and so I think that's part of how we're experiencing it, and that brings in what Anne was talking about, the time. And there's an idea in biology that there's two different kinds of environments. When you have stable environments, creatures evolve traits. When you have unstable environments, they evolve their evolvability. And we need to shift from sort of trait-based solutions to evolving our evolvability. Now that's very abstract, and let me try and say something that I think addresses Chad's concern. I don't know if it will address it sufficiently, but at least it will give us maybe a little bit more. I tend to see liquid modernity, I tend to reappropriate it. I'm doing a course right now, Seeing God Again for the first time, as the self-destruction and self-dissolution of all the dichotomies that were given to us by modernity. So modernity rejected the fundamental dichotomy of the supernatural and the natural, and then what it did was it smuggled it into a bunch of other dichotomies. Fact value is ought, theory data, analytic synthetic, right? Spiritual material, Descartes, right? Internal, external world, all these dichotomies. And what postmodernity has basically done, in a nutshell, I'm going to get people screaming at me for this, but what I think was right about it is what saying, well, if you reject that dichotomy, modernity, we should equally reject your dichotomies because they're no different. They're just other dichotomies. And so what's happened, I think, is the grammar that were given by those dichotomies is dissolving. Now, that is in a lot of ways. This is Durkheim's anomie. That's traumatizing for people. It's dissolving. It's a fundamental way, and people keep trying to rebuild up. But the problem is the people that are driving this collapse are not fringe bohemians or people tripping on acid. They're analytic philosophers and scientists and physicists and biologists. And so we're going through something like that. Now, I think there's a way of getting people to realize something. Let's just do one of these dichotomies, the fact value. The fact value dichotomy, by the way, Putnam just decimates it. A quick and easy way to get a sense of that is relevance of fact or value. It's neither, right? It's not a subjective value and it's not an objective fact. And there's a lot there's a more complex argument. I'm just trying to give you an intuitive sense. Now, why is that dissolution hard for us? Because we've built so much around it, but why is it good for us? And this is what I'm trying to answer you, Chad. William Desmond talks about default atheism. If you have the fact-value dichotomy, you have a valueless objective reality, a purely subjective and therefore not real source of value that is projecting in an illusory fashion on reality, and that's default atheism. If you have that grammar, atheism is what you should conclude. You can struggle and you can argue and you can go to church, but if you're in that world, this is his argument, right? You're locked. It makes it impossible for you to experience God if you're being consistent to that world.
And maybe conversely, for an atheist, the fact-value distinction is real.
The fact-value distinction is tremendously real, and it's very problematic for the atheist because the atheist has to involve transcendent values, such as the capacity for truth to correct all possible inquirers. Right. And that's a long argument if we want to go into more detail. And the point is, the fact-value dichotomy being liquefied, right, it is traumatizing, but it's also liberating because that frees us from default atheism. It makes us possible. It makes it possible to look at that between what Desmond calls the metexu, what I call the transjective, the connectedness, as really real. That it's more real than the subjective and the objective. It makes possible a way for us to see God again in a deep way. And so I totally agree with Rod. We have to go through, and it's not a pleasant recommendation. We need to go through this, but there within the liquefaction, there's the possibility of a genuine liberation. There's a freedom from a toxic grammar that blinds us to the possibility of experiencing the sacred in a way that we can somehow coordinate with the everyday worldview we're living in.
Yeah, John, one of the things that I got from the kids in Paris before they started their walk, one of them said to me, "We were raised with nothing. Our parents gave us nothing." Now, presumably these kids were raised in the church, or at least the church was vaguely part of their lives, but their experience of Christianity, Catholic Christianity, this being France, was that it was maybe just a cultural way of being, or it gave you good suggestions for how to live, but there was nothing concrete there. And most of their generation completely abandoned anything to do with faith. But these kids were they're rebelling against their parents' idea that there's really no horizon beyond, bourgeois, consumerist satisfaction. And to be honest, as I'm talking about this, I recall a conversation I had with the French public intellectual Alain Finkielkraut a few years ago. He's a Jewish atheist who started out as a man of the left in the 60s, but it's now by default become a man of the right simply because he has not gone along with what we call wokeness. But we were talking about how both of us really admire the very pessimistic work of Michel Houellebecq, the French novelist, how we think he's a great diagnostician of our time. But I looked at him and asked him, I said, "Professor, where do you find hope?" And he said, "I have no hope." And I told him, "Well, I find my hope in Jesus Christ, but please don't think I'm saying that to you like an American televangelist. I'm not optimistic about the future, but for a Christian, hope is a belief that there is something real beyond what we see here, and that even if we have to suffer, perhaps even die for the truth and for our faith, hope is the confidence that that suffering has meaning. That I guess you could even say, I didn't put it this way to him, but that the journey has meaning, even if we fall along the way. And that's why I am not willing to surrender to despair. And he looked at me very kindly and he said, well, that's good for you Americans, but here in France, we don't believe in God. And I realized the poor man, I mean, he wasn't trying to be triumphalistic. He was just sort of giving the shrugging admission that there is no way out. There's no exit for him, because he had closed off in advance the idea that there was a transcendent realm, that it existed at all, and if it existed, that it could be known. And I think that's our problem, that even a lot of people who might even profess belief in God, they live as if there is no ultimate meaning beyond the borders of their skull. And that's why they're in secret despair.
Sam, you haven't said much. Go ahead, Sam.
All right. So this might be a little bit of a pivot, but this was sort of my initial reaction to John's pitch, is Theosis and Pilgrimage. And one thing that I think is sort of not often realized is that when Jesus went to Jerusalem during Holy Week, he was on a pilgrimage. It was a high religious holiday of the Jewish people. It was Passover week. And that the reason why the city was full of people and full of political tension was because there was thousands, tens of thousands of people there on pilgrimage. And that Jesus is simultaneously on a pilgrimage while creating the new pattern that will be many other people's patterns for which they pilgrimage, while also being a single person doing a single human event and a human life all at the same time, right? There's this microcosm, macrocosm, single human person thing going on, right? Jesus is bringing together all of the Old Testament stuff into like 1 week, while simultaneously, like when he's in the upper room having the Passover meal with his disciples, and he says, take this, drink this, this is the blood, this is my blood of the new covenant, right? He's pulling together an old covenant and creating a new covenant in a religious pilgrimage, in a religious ritual, while creating a religious ritual, while also being the person who will end up being on a cross later that same week, simultaneously. And that, my outsider Christian perspective will say that Jesus himself is the archetypal example of theosis, that he was made perfect through what he suffered. And that the word made perfect there from Hebrews is from the root of telos. He was made telos. He was telosified. He reached his end. He reached his perfection. He reached his purpose when he's there suffering. And that I think that a lot of a lot of traditional Christians in America, when they hear the word theosis and you tell them what it means, they bristle, because it sounds heretical or blasphemous, right? Like we become God, right? Isn't that exactly what the snake tempted Eve to do in the whole first place, right? And it sounds presumptuous, self-exalting, or Mormon, or something like that. And that I think that people are scared of that idea because it seems like a grasping for power and status. But Jesus shows that the path to the power and the status is the exact opposite of what anyone would think. And that Jesus, like I said, it's like simultaneously a pilgrimage and the thing that creates a pilgrimage at the same time as he's doing that. So that's what John made me think.
Go ahead, Brad.
I would just say, point of theological objection, I don't think that Jesus became perfect by his crucifixion. He was God himself, but he gave us an example of how to live, to follow, to become united to God, which is to himself. But I think the point is generally valid, that Philip Reeve once said that in the past, in the last world, the world of where the Abrahamic religion still had meaning and authority over people, when you had Christians would ask, "What am I to do?" The answer was, "Do as your Savior did." And so you're right about that. I think now, though, that we have become, even so many Christians have become so scattered by liquid modernity that we think we can just make it up. And what a lot of Christians, modern Christians, don't even realize, because we're such historically ignorant creatures, is that Theosis and pilgrimage was just the way it was done in the first millennium of the church. Even in Dante, the Commedia is a perfect, it's a Catholic work. I mean, it was written after the Great Schism, but it's entirely about Theosis. And in Paradiso, all of the souls who make it to paradise, they become fully transparent before God, and they're completely filled with the Spirit of God while remaining themselves. They are not God, but they are united fully to God in some mysterious way. And that's what the journey on earth is about. But as John or someone pointed out earlier, let's never make the mistake of thinking that we can ever achieve that fully in this imperfect life, given our unbrokenness.
But John?
I wanted to bring those 2 points together, because what I was trying to do earlier with the liquid modernity and the dissolving of the dichotomies and the opening up of possibilities, as I was trying to say, I was trying to make the argument that we could, this is a pedagogical argument, we could try to help people reframe what's happening in liquid modernity as an invitation to pilgrimage. I'm reading a very good book right now. I forget the author, so I apologize. And he's arguing about like what's been happening, especially in North American Christianity. You had the bleed from the main line into the more evangelical, but now the evangelical churches are bleeding in certain ways. And he talks about how he went through this progression, and he's actually proposing that what Christianity, and this is something coming, through this whole trajectory. He's actually proposing theosis. And the argument he gives, I kid you not, I don't think he's read my work. He basically gives the argument for the meaning crisis, and he says what that does is open us up to the real possibility, not just sort of, theosis, no, like a epistemologically, ontologically radical proposal of pilgrimage to theosis that will be the proper response. And that's, I'm trying to, I don't know if I'm doing a good job. I'm trying to say that liquid modernity is an opportunity that we can frame it as an affordance and an invitation to a pilgrimage to a profound theosis, because default atheism is now gone. It's dissolved with the dissolution of all of those dichotomies. And so there's real possibilities here.
All right, Annie.
Yeah, so I want to follow up on that a little bit, John. I agree with you. My husband and I, one of the first things we talked about at one of our first dates was whether or not postmodernism was good or bad. And he was raised
what a date!
Oh my gosh!
They knew they were meant for each other.
I'm not going to give that advice to my friend, to my kids.
No.
When you're on a first date, bring up is postmodernism good or bad?
I mean, yes, and we've been happy ever since. But I remember, yes, in some ways, the relativism of postmodernism, the expressivism, all of that has negative consequences. But I, back then was arguing, but it opens up this space for a return to narrative, a return to more integrated modes of understanding. And I think of Owen Barfield's idea of final participation, that we had a primary participation and then a sort of separation of those modes of knowing that we can now integrate in a better way. So I ride dressage. This is my sport. And one thing you think about is that in any kind of sport, when you start, you just get on and you kick the horse, you go. It's simple, right? But then you go through this whole process of complexity where you have to break down the process and learn how to control every little part of your muscle. It's very, very, very complex. But then on the other side, you reintegrate that into a kind of final participation, a final simplicity. And I think that's some of the opportunity that we are working toward, is this final participation, this final reintegration, which is a good opportunity. But what I would love to hear from y'all, because I'm still sympathetic to like Chad and my own experience of the just grievous difficulty that is liquid modernity. So if we think of this rate of change speeding up, and we all feel it. And if we go back to the idea that our understanding is rooted in our embodiment, okay, so that when I live in a print culture, I'm going to understand the world in a way that's shaped by my reading of books. And then we our culture moves into the 20th century, and our material and the embodied way through which we understand ourselves gets more and more complicated and changes faster and faster. And so, I've been through the rise of the internet and email, and then blogs, and then Facebook, and then Twitter, and then, and now virtual reality, and all these different modes of experiencing the world become ways by which I try to understand myself, right? So hopefully that makes sense. We can unpack that a little bit more. But when that rate of change is so fast, how do we tap into it, again, like thinking of trying to make a pilgrimage to actually go somewhere when our landscape is constantly shifting and melting on us? What might it look like amidst liquid modernity to find stepping stones, to find footholds by which we can continue to move further up and further in? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. All right, well, I can tell you how. You do things like do as your ancestors did, spend 3 days walking from Paris to Chartres, or do the pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, or follow traditions that worked for so long for so many people. And we have this sort of, what's the word that's biased towards the present, like the false narrative of progress, like we stand now at the pinnacle of human knowledge and we can't possibly go back to the Middle Ages. Well, no, in one sense we can't, because we can't unknow what we know. But we also should realize that those people, for all they didn't know about science and technology and other things that are good things that we have, they might have known something about the human soul or how to live well that we don't. And we can recover that. But we can't recover that by simply sitting in a room and reading a book and going, aha. We have to get out there and use our bodies to do it. I mean, I think about the way I became a Christian. I was raised in a sort of Easter and Christmas Methodist family. But I knew that the sort of middle-class Christianity in which I was raised, it was dead already. People didn't know it, but I felt it. I'm 58. I'm Gen X. So when John says that default atheism is dead, so too is moralistic therapeutic deism, which is the main form of Christianity in North America. And for me, what broke through my own defenses against Christianity was encountering the beauty at Chartres when I went at age 17 for the first time. Just walked in and I knew without understanding where the knowledge came from that God was real. And it came to me through this encounter with wonder, radical wonder in the stones and glass of Chartres. And that started me on a journey towards faith, a journey that was completed in a sense, or at least confirmed me as a Christian, when I met an elderly Guatemalan priest who had become a religious believer in his late 40s after having experienced miracles. And I met this old man when I went to interview him. He was well into his 90s, had been born in the 1890s. And he didn't say anything that profound to me, but there was so much peace and light radiating off of this man that I left there saying, I want to know what he knows and I want to be who he is. So those two experiences of wonder, embodied in the person of Father Sanchez and in the cathedral, the stones and the glass of Chartres, opened my imagination up to consider in a different way the theological arguments that I've been wrestling with on a purely rationalistic level and not gotten anywhere. Final point, back when COVID happened, we found in our little Orthodox mission, I was living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana then, we started seeing a lot of young people showing up at our mission, young couples and young men. And we would ask them, why are you here? And we would get some version of the same same response, that COVID shook them to the core. It made them realize that the things that they had taken for granted that would always be there might not be there. I remember one young man, he and his wife had come from an evangelical megachurch. They told me, we knew that we had to have a Christianity that would give us the rootedness, that would enable us to hold on through whatever is coming. And that's why they came to the Orthodox Church. Now, I'm not making an argument here for orthodoxy. What I am talking about, though, is that deep hunger for rootedness in a stable tradition that they didn't feel they were getting at their megachurch. That's what brought them to the tradition.
I'm going to talk a little bit about liquid. Go ahead, Sam.
I have a question for Rod. So all of the pilgrimage examples that you have given are old world examples.
Yeah.
Pilgrimage is something that re-enchants or enchants the geography of a particular place. And in America, I can think of two things that kind of come close. Like people will hike the Appalachian Trail, especially a very sort of outdoorsy kind of transcendentalist kind of pilgrimage. And then there is the Freedom Trail in Boston, which is sort of like a reenactment pilgrimage of the Revolutionary War. But those two things are not quite at the level of pilgrimage, right? They're kind of in that middle, more secular ground. Can we have something that is like that pilgrimage experience that is the American story or is authentically American without needing to hop back across the ocean in more ways than one?
Dude, that is a question I'm going to be wrestling with in this new book. Because it's so easy here in Europe, and it's amazing that more Europeans don't take advantage of that, but that's another story. But I think that we can make a pilgrimage wherever we are if you choose to follow the church's liturgical year, and it's easier for people like me who are in a liturgical church where time itself is organized and sacralized, by following the liturgical calendar. I'm not sure how Protestants would do it, just because I don't have that experience. But
that connects Protestantism to America a little bit too. Like, is this only possible in these old world traditions, or is there something in the Native American, that means something else, in America's own churches that can do this, or is there something fundamentally flawed and vacuous about America itself that can accomplish what you're asking?
Well, I think we can't blame Americans or Canadians or anyone living in the New World for where we are. We're new societies compared to the societies of Europe and the Near East. And there's no changing that. It doesn't make us bad people. It just means we have a lot less to work with. But what I would say, again, is the flaw might not be in America, the geography of America or Canada or Mexico or wherever. The flaw might be in modernity and, frankly, in Protestantism. And I say that not to put down Protestants, please understand me, but I'm saying that the deeper I get into church history, the more difficult, and think about it in terms of theosis and rediscovering a sense of wonder, the more I become aware of what a severe rupture Protestantism was. And I'm not coming at this, maybe I'm being too, I'm overcompensating for not wanting to be critical of Protestantism, of the quality of faith of Protestants, individual Protestants. But Protestantism itself, the more I live here in Europe and the deeper I've gone into the Orthodox tradition, I really see how bare the cupboard is conceptually within Protestantism for exactly this sort of thing. Paul, tell me I'm wrong.
So I spent the last 3 weeks looking at a lot of streams and rivers going through deserts. And the funny thing about liquids is it moves in different speeds. And in one little town in a flyover state in North America, for one meal, I sat with my wife and one of my adult daughters, and we had to explain to my daughter what a salad bar from the 1980s and 90s was like. And if you're old enough, you remember, you don't know if you're under or over, but the sneeze guard and all of that. And then the next morning, we went to the hippest, chicest coffee house you could imagine in the same city. I heard that the people who founded this thing renovated a greenhouse, and then this boomer came in and complained about Trump and this deep red state, and and I'm just watching the swirls of our world go by us, and it's like this is all in this tiny little flyover town in a very unpopulated state in middle America, partly thanks to the internet and jets and nets and all of this. And again, part of the reason I play the heck out of Chad's poem, and part of the reason I pointed to Chad's pitch is that, again, as a pastor, my church is struggling with, is this little church at the corner of Florin and Amherst, is this going to survive? Because I'm worried, where will the souls go? Because most people probably, one woman, she's right now sort of driving her electric scooter to church now. So she lives about a mile away. She can do that. But if we relocate to a different area or merge with another church, she can't get there, never mind getting to Europe. And so, what struck me in Sam's story about Jesus is something that I very much learned from C.S. Lewis, when Lewis in his book Miracles talks about the reality of an apple. There's a very, we want it a little bit liquid because we want it to be juicy, but it's a very real thing. And Chad's daughter is a very real person, and Chad's life is a very real thing. And one of the things that really always strikes me every time I watch Chad's poem that he sort of put to video and music is you have all of these elements from the 90s where, you've got sort of Trump and one of his younger brides and a baby and McDonald's. And the line that catches me every time is, a clown serves the sacrament we eat. And so part of what I think Christianity has been able to do, and most of the other major world religions have struggled with it, is that the center of mass of Christianity has moved. You can still be a Christian and never make it to Jerusalem or Constantinople or Rome. And this is sort of seen in Jesus and his pilgrimage, because on one point, Jesus both makes this move within pilgrimage, and what he does, let's say in the Last Supper, is he both, on one hand, takes the Seder, the Exodus meal, but also transforms it through himself into something then that is in Europe, and it is in America, and it is in Asia. And so part of what Christianity tends to do is it doesn't lose its roots, but there's a way in Christianity where it
spiritualizes.
Yes, but it's the roots can be relocated and transplanted, and that's part of what I've seen. John, you wanted to say something, so John, and then Annie.
Well, first of all, I want to apply to that. Buddhism has done the same. Buddhism moved. In fact, Buddhism is largely dead in India, where it emerged, and it's more prevalent in China, and you have the distinction between Theravadan and Mahayana Buddhism, for example. It has a tremendous capacity, like Christianity, to enter into symbiosis with other things, and so I just to put that out there. I wanted to pick up on something, though, that I think I resonated with, and I don't know if I want to claim it as Protestant, although I think Protestantism makes a difference to this, which is something that is, I think, the fetish of modernity, which is autonomy, and the autonomous self. And what COVID showed is the pretense that meaning is autonomous, that I can make my life meaningful by my own laws. And of course, we've had the two greatest, it's really, really amazing. The two greatest philosophers of the 20th century, Heidegger and Wittgenstein, were all about how meaning can't possibly be private like that. Like that's their, it has to be shareable and correctable. It has to be shareable and correctable, or it's not meaning, and it's not capable of doing what meaning needs to be, which is capable of truth, right? And so I think what COVID showed people dramatically is, wait, meaning isn't autonomous. And my concern about So in that sense, I'm deeply resonant with you, Rod. I'm a little bit, I guess I want to push on, there's a new challenge. I understand what you're saying about returning to your roots, but we have new ontologies. And I think that's what philosophers are increasingly saying. The virtual, the artificial, and the cyber are new ontologies. And we need to do something like the holders of legacy sacredness. I'll try and speak as neutrally as I can because I don't want to be involved in the particular debates. We have a responsibility because the thing that's toxic about the thing that can be, the thing that can be toxic about these new ontologies is they promise autonomy while actually subjecting us to heteronomy, to demonic, insidious forces that rob us of agency, selfhood, and personhood. And I think yes, we should reach into the primordiality of our roots, but we also have to recover a newness in our relationship with ultimate in order to address these new ontologies in a profound way, because they work precisely by appealing to that fetish of autonomy and personal preferential meaning, while actually making people subject to a loss of agency, selfhood, and personhood that exacerbates the meaning crisis in a profound way. And I do want Rod to respond.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be pushy.
No. And I do think we need to recover our roots, but I do think there's also a need for a lot of innovation in the face of these new ontologies. There's a lot of work that I think needs to be done around that is innovative in a powerful way. And I think what's happening, I think we're going through a paradigm shift in science and philosophy, not driven by physics, but driven by biology, 4E cognitive science, and other things. And I think the legacy religions need to talk more to that in order to come up with the innovative responses to these nascent and potentially noxious ontologies. So consider it loving pushback a little bit, and I do want to hear what Rod has to say.
Yeah, no, I thank you for saying that. And what I would add to expand on what I was saying before, it's not like, oh, I've got this problem, I'll just become Orthodox or Catholic, join one of the more sacramental liturgical traditions, and everything's going to be worked out. You will go to any Catholic or Orthodox church and find Christians who are dead in the spirit in ways that they aren't at the local megachurch, perhaps. So nobody has a corner on this now, because Orthodoxy is perhaps the most traditional form of Christianity in the terms of its liturgies and the way it thinks about theology. Nevertheless, it can't be a self-contained thing. It has to be able to relate to the world, and you can't just go there and sing all the old hymns and do the liturgies and the prostrations without it and have it not change you. In other words, it is quite possible for like the Latin Mass or the Divine Liturgy to become a destination instead of a means to the true destination, which is theosis. Mm-hmm. And I think our Protestant brothers and sisters really have a lot to teach us about how to make religion more popular in the good sense, in the sense of being able to reach people where they are. And finally, I would say simply that we are at a stage now in cultural history, civilizational history, where we Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox had better figure out how to work together and to come up with creative solutions for making, putting new wine into old skins, or old wine into new skins. I forget which is Paul. You know Scripture better than I. You're Protestant, but we have to make this. We have to figure out how to speak to a world of people who are living in the AI world, for example, which is going to radically shake everything up.
Yes,
we can't simply say come back to the old way and everything will be fixed, because guess what? You're still you standing there at the Divine Liturgy or the the Latin Mass or whatever old thing you are, you're still the same flawed, broken person who has to go out and live in the world of liquid modernity. And if your church and your tradition can't help you do that and achieve theosis in that world, then it is it's hard to see the value in it.
All right, Annie, and then we're going to do a final round. Chad, I'm getting a little echo from you, so I'm just muting you.
I just wanted to thank Rod. That was a good answer. I appreciate it.
All right, Annie, and then we're going to do a summary round.
Okay. Well, I think, Sam, you asked a great question, and I want to see if I can make some connections between John and Rod's insight. And something I've wrestled with personally a great deal as someone who's barely Protestant still. I'm Anglo-Orthodox Catholic, kind of standing on the bridge between these worlds, trying to figure out how all this works, right? And to return to this idea that the meaning is in the metaphor, we keep using the language of rooted. So let's look at, the idea of a tree to maybe see if this helps us pull some things together, right? And so what's unique to Christianity, and in some ways a stumbling block, is it's so fully incarnational that we say God became one particular man from one tribe and nation and was born in Bethlehem, right? And so in that sense, the base of our tree is there, and that is the place of rootedness. And Padre mentioned this on a podcast recently. Jerusalem is the center of the world in that sense. And so in some way, all roads will lead, all pilgrimages in terms of incarnational space. I mean, what greater pilgrimage is there in terms of physical place than Jerusalem? And yet trees are fractal, right? That pattern fractally repeats as it goes out. And so and so we can think about, so how do we think about pilgrimage in America? Here we are in a totally different continent, in some ways so far from our roots, right? And then in that way swaying kind of chaotically in the hurricane of liquid modernity, let's say. How do we out here on the edge of the West, on the edge of the world, recover principles of pilgrimage and tapping into those ancient roots so we can find some grounding, some stepping stones for this pilgrimage of theosis? One important thing I think is going on, I see it going on, is the recovery of creation theology, right? And so what do we think of when we thought of pilgrimages in America? We thought of, well, hiking or nature or creation. And actually my undergraduate degree is basically in mountaineering. As an outdoor education degree, because there was always in me this spiritual hunger, and somehow I knew that climbing a mountain was a ritual participation in that spiritual hunger, in that search for transcendence, right? And Moses went up a mountain on a reason. And so what I think we have an opportunity to do here in America is recover some of this creation theology, because it is general revelation. It is the revelation of the Logos through the things he's made that is the rooted foundation for the revelation of Christ to come. There's a reason Christ talks about, sheep, and he uses natural metaphors. These creation metaphors prepare us, ground us for the further up, further in. And so I think there's a legitimacy to the American pilgrimage up these great mountains that we've been given in this land, up the Rocky Mountains, up the Appalachian Mountains, up the Pacific Mountains, that is a legitimate mode of pilgrimage that can help. In America, there's a potentiality for a rediscovery of that ground of revelation, if that makes sense, that I think I see as an opportunity here.
No, I think you're right. I think you're really onto something important there, because if there's one thing North America is rich in, it's in natural beauty. And, when you were talking, Eddie, I was thinking about what the early Christians in Ireland, the Celtic monks, did. They received monasticism through the desert fathers of Egypt, which is where monasticism came from. But they didn't have any deserts to retreat into. What they did have were distant places, where the forest or these islands like Skellig Michael or Iona, places that were outside the world, so to speak, to which they could retreat to pray, to contemplate, and to grow in the spirit so that they could give back to the world what they found. I think it's really important when we think about, if you look at in the New Testament, Jesus would often go into the desert to pray before he would give an important teaching. And these too are forms of pilgrimage. And all of us, wherever we are, we can do this sort of thing. There needs to be some structured sense. You need to bring structure to your life, to your journey, but also, and I think this is something so important, Hartmut Rosa talks about this in a secular sense, we need to change our mind to anticipate or to believe structurally that the world outside of our heads in some mysterious way points to God. Rosa has this concept of resonance, which I think is a good metaphor, or a good equivalent for what I call enchantment. The idea that when we feel that we are resonant with something in the world or another person, we are in contact with it, but we haven't brought it so close that we can control it. Because the more you try to control it, the enchantment, the resonance, it goes away. So I think that wherever we live, if we can start to train ourselves to see the world as a series of signs pointing to God, not just dead matter, but in some sense part of God's mystery, the mystery of creation, then we can create our own meaningful pilgrimages wherever we are. And the desert, in the sense of the desert fathers, in the sense of Christ going to the desert, it can be anywhere.
Okay, our time is moving on. What we're going to do is I'm going to do a final round in order for summary statements, and then I'm going to thank our guests, and then I'm going to drop the link. And I anticipate that the link will be sought after quickly, and the queue will fill up quickly. And the guests are free to leave once I drop the link. They don't have to necessarily, once we open up the floodgates of the estuary, who knows what comes in.
Yeah, but, Paul, it's dark here. Can you see how
I can see it?
The sun is getting darker. Down.
So, all right, Sam, closing comments or summations or last words from you.
I really liked John's recent conversation with Bishop Maximus that you shared. I thought that was absolutely fabulous. And one of the points from that conversation that stuck with me, I think, John, you were making this point, is the difference between a big world sort of question or problem where the ontology is sort of undefined, the goal is vague, and there is radical uncertainty about the nature of the world that you're playing in, versus a small world problem. Yes. Where it's like a game or a sport where all the rules are clear, the objective is clear, and then you're just trying to figure out how to navigate a very well-defined sort of problem. And that I think that pilgrimage is sort of like a creation of a small world that we can play in as an attempt of self-improvement. Making yourself better is hard. Changing yourself is a hard thing to do. As much as you can't just wish yourself to be different. That doesn't tend to work. But it does seem like pilgrimage is some sort of psychotechnology. I don't know. I might be abusing that word, as something like a creation of a small world thing to imitate the transformation that someone else has gone through. Because a pilgrimage is often an imitation of some world transformative event, normally that some individual or group of people went through, and that we're trying to kind of grab at that magic sauce or something like that happened in that extremely meaningful time, whether it's the Exodus, Jesus dying on the cross, or even the Revolutionary War in America or something like that. But the point is that it's supposed to change our real world. It's a creation of a small world that's supposed to ripple back up into your big world. And I think that's where I would try and connect it to with what Chad was saying, that really, what we want is to be able to change ourselves for the better. That's what theosis is, or letting ourselves be changed by a force bigger than ourselves for the better, but we still have to participate and open ourselves up to that. And that, looks like loving your wife better, treating your kids better, being a better parent, being a better family member, a community member, and stuff like that. And that I think that, the crucifixion of Jesus is the ultimate pilgrimage. It's a small world and a big world event that happened all at the same time. And so that's
excellent.
bow on top. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Annie. Hard one to follow.
Yeah. Goodness. I think I'm fascinated, John, by what the topic you brought up about the new ontologies of our, I assume you mean our digital spaces, our LLM egregores and such things. And I want to try and connect this in a summary statement to what we've been talking about, being rooted in embodied pilgrimages. There was a motto I got from, I think Michael Ward made it up, but I'm not sure, but that's the one I got it from, where he says, let the good serve the better and both serve the best. And so as we try to interface with this complicated world, let good things, we're having a digital conversation. This is good. Let it serve what is better, which is my life with my embodied family, my local community, and let both of those things serve what is best, which is that center of the world. So as a Christian, I would say my Eucharistic community, where we gather together in ritual to aim toward God together, to participate in the life of God together, to try to structure our lives fractally that way, so that one way I think about that is I'll go talk to my husband about this conversation. Maybe I'll share it with someone in my book group who comes to my actual house for a book club, so we could talk about it more, and maybe we'll meditate on some way that could help us grow in our ritual life together as a church, right? So just trying to think about the fractal ordering of our lives, so that the branches are rooted, or the leaves, the branchlets are rooted into the branches, and the branches are rooted into the trunk, and that grounding ultimately, right, is in our physical lives. The sun still rises and sets, the winter still comes and goes, and how we can order that fractally in that incarnational space, I think will help us deal epistemologically, spiritually, relationally with the moving winds of modernity, at the edges. So that's kind of the takeaway that I am thinking about at the end of our conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Annie. Rod.
No, what I'm thinking is I can't wait to get to Chicago and see some of you people in real life, because we have a lot of work to do, and not just work, we have a lot of play to do, meaningful play, because this is the meaning crisis is something that all of us are caught up in, and the people we love are caught up in. And all of us from our traditions, the various Christian traditions, and even outside the Christian tradition, but who have something important to say about what the meaning crisis is and how we might address it. We all need to be at the table. And I'm thinking as we finish about what struck me so much about seeing the Chartres Cathedral at age 17. I remember the thought that came through my mind standing there in the labyrinth in the middle was, I want to know the God that inspired men whose names we don't even know to build such a temple for his glory and for his worship. Those anonymous men knew God in a way that I think so many of us just aren't capable of anymore, in modernity. But if there were once men and women who knew God in that way, there can be again, if we can recover that. And one book I would recommend to everyone that was so important to helping me work my way through this is Heavenly Participation by Hans Boersma, formerly a Reformed theologian, now Anglican. And he talks about in the first millennium of Christianity, everyone believed that in some sense, just to live was to participate in the life of God. God wasn't just a being, the supreme being who was out there far away in heaven, but he was near. And as we Orthodox say in our morning prayer, we address the God who is everywhere present and fills all things. That was the way all Christians once saw it up into the modern times, up until, frankly, and this is a conversation maybe we can have at the Midwestary, up until the time of nominalism, which separated God from creation in a way that hadn't been done before. And of course, this paves the way for Descartes several centuries later to do the mind-body split. And John has written so powerfully about how that affected us. My point is simply to say that when you go visit these old cathedrals and old monasteries and walk these old paths, you're getting in touch with Christians who are part of the communion of saints, and who had the way once, or who knew the way, who knew a better path or a more sure path to theosis. And if we can clear our minds and get rid of the false idea of progress, the idea that we know better than they do in everything, then that's that humility, that recovery of that epistemological humility, and that refusal of chronological snobbishness is perhaps the first step of an authentic pilgrimage of recovery and rebirth and rebuilding.
All right. Thank you, Rod. John.
I'm sorry we've lost Anne. I wanted to tell her that her point about mountains was a very good point. It was a very good point. I hope that gets back to her. So two main things in summary. I didn't want to name this because I wanted to see what would happen. But as we were talking about theosis, oh, Anne, you're back. You missed me saying that I was grateful for your point about mountains, which I thought was excellent. So thank you for that. That was a great point. As we were talking about theosis and theoria, pilgrimage, we end up talking about theophany, how everything shines as an icon of God. And I know you don't want to hear this word, some of you, but we're doing theurgia. What are the rituals that will make us receptive to this? Because we can't manufacture it, we have to be receptive to it. And I want to connect that then to what Sam said of pilgrimage as a way in which we're trying to make ourselves more receptive. And that's what pilgrimage is for. If you think if you think you're going to manufacture something by a pilgrimage, and this is what all the pilgrimage literature says, you've killed the pilgrimage. It won't happen. That's an Enlightenment engineering approach, and I've criticized myself for once taking that approach and realizing how fundamentally wrong it is. I wanted to pick up on what Sam said then about this receptivity. I think in pilgrimage, we're actually moving from one small world to another small world, and we have to be in the space between small worlds for a bit. And then we're in the space. And what that is what that does is constantly, and I mean this in the Buddhist sense of sati, that constantly reminds us of the large world that is beyond any and all small worlds. And so we have to be open to that large world breaking in prophecy, or however you want it, theophany. And then we have a response to try and make the small world more receptive to the large world. And pilgrimage brings with it a kind of poesis. There's a poetry that emerges, a making of a coming to terms in both senses of the word, in both senses of the phrase comes out. So I wanted to pick up, I think pilgrimage is doing that in a profound way. It's reminding us, like Annie said, that we're always embodied, we're embedded, we're finite, but we're always rooted in our primordiality, but we're always responsible to the ultimate. We're in a small world, but we have to remember the large world, and we have to constantly move between small worlds and poeticize our small worlds so that they become more responsive and responsible to the large world. And I think I want to add to Rod's. We need to give up the fable. I wouldn't say myth. The fable of progress. Right. I would say we need to give up the fable of the autonomous self. I think this is actually having the effect of making us vulnerable to demonic forces, Molochian forces, egregores, and insidious nudging, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's my summary.
All right, thank you, John. Chad, you're muted, so don't forget to unmute.
I think it's working. Okay.
Yeah.
I would just, first of all, I want to thank John and Rod and Annie, you guys, for taking your time to come spend with us. I really, really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to the event. And these things are always, that's going to be I think a memorable event in my own life. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. Um, I'm thinking about uh, I've had this sense for a long time that that people we have this I have a desire to see the world change, and that and it's like John has said, it's combinatorially explosive. It's like I don't know how to how to get through to people and this and that, and it's like it's just too big. And how do I how do people change? And then I just think of alcoholics. They generally don't just like wake up one day and say, son of a bitch, I just think I should do better, and then they turn themselves into better people just because they something switches and they say, "Oh, I'm just going to do better." It's like, no, like they have to. Oftentimes, we have to hit a wall, and unfortunately, like it's weird because I'm like this pessimistic optimist. I think it's going to probably get a hell of a lot worse before it gets better. But being that we are liquid Modernians, we can breathe underwater. Like that's pretty great. And so like we should use that to our advantage. I mean, okay, it's wild, dude. Like so my wife sponsors a woman who like was who grew up in a terrible situation, who didn't have God or spirituality in her life, and then she ended up burning her life to the ground and then coming into like a 12-step program. And one day she started like the way that she was ushered into spirituality through crystals. Okay. And my wife is like, okay, whatever. But anyways, she helped her along the way. And then one day she started watching Joel Osteen, of all people, for crying out loud. And she like started to find her higher power started to kind of take shape out of this liquid man, abominable liquid dude, and then one day she comes to us, she said, "Did you guys know that Easter had something to do with Jesus?" And we're like, "Of course, yeah." And she's like, "I had no idea." And that's like there are so many people that's like that. And like so I don't know. I think I think one of the traps that somebody like me or many of us can fall into is thinking that the abominable liquid modernity man is the scapegoat, when in fact he's just a symptom. And how do we deal with that? Like again, like we have to be able to reach people at a very simple level. Most people, I think, are very, very simple. Have but like have a desire to be different and don't know how to. And yeah, that's liquid modernity and all that stuff. But at the same time, like I don't know how much longer liquid modernity is actually going to be progressing. To be honest, I mean, how much further can it honestly get? I mean, are we going to run into some sort of like liquid, or I'm sorry, like ice age modernity? Because at some point it's just got to kind of hit a wall and just be like and just freeze up, and we'll just be standing around like, well, I guess nothing's changed. Yeah, we got AI now. Well, that's great, but like, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I probably sound like a crazy person, but I don't know. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time. I think the thing I just want to say is mostly is, can we not be assholes to people? I think that's it. Like,
I think that's in the Desert Fathers.
That makes sense.
In the Philokalia.
Yeah,
it's sort of like Jordan Peterson. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. It's like love your neighbor, or at least don't be an asshole.
Right. Exactly. All right.
Well,
so that's all I have. But thank you guys.
Well, I've enjoyed this conversation tremendously, and as Rod said, for me, it's in anticipation being together in Chicago, and that for some, we have two young men, John Demere and Joe Cross, who have been traversing all the estuaries around the country, and their last stop, they're on a pilgrimage.
They're creating a new pilgrimage path. Yeah,
that's right. And fortunately, they stopped in Sacramento, and I just was able to catch them right when I got back from vacation. And actually, Jonathan Demere said to me, he said, when I named the channel, I said, this is the first estuary road trip, because he said, I don't want this one to be the last. I want other people to do this. And in fact, I mentioned to him, John Van Donk and I, back in the meetup days, we had started that, and it was stopped by COVID. And so I am really anticipating being in Chicago with all of you. And the frustrating thing about these conferences is that there just is never quite as much time as I'd like to really get the chance to get to know as many of you as I really want to. And, I think about, I've had, little bits of time with John Vervaeke, not nearly enough, but I treasure what I've had. I've had little glances with Rod at points. Hopefully I'll get a chance to get to know him. I'll meet Annie for the first time. Sam Tideman has made his way to Sacramento before. And of course, Chad I love. And I can't wait to see Chad again in Chicago. So thank all of you, especially those of you who are on here, have come on, John and Rod and Annie. And I am going to drop the link. You are welcome to stay, but when I sort of open up this, the Dutch have this great system. When I went to the Netherlands, Van Donk had to show me everything that little country had to offer. And so we went to this great sea work that holds out the flood. And I am going to lift the gate and open the flood, and probably a sea monster or two will come in. But, hey, playing with Leviathan, if you can sort of stomach it, it can be quite a thing.
If you want to go deep, you got to be prepared to wrestle with Leviathan.
There you go. So I'm dropping the link, and this will basically go until it peters out or I have to leave because I have other work I need to do. But any of you who want to excuse yourself anywhere in between, you're more than welcome to do so. And I usually take people in the order that they come in, and the first person to come in is our dear Sherry.
I had to get here.
Welcome, Sherry. What do you have to say?
Well, I didn't get to hear the whole thing. I'm going to have to go back and listen because you guys were touching on something that is so dear to me. The whole idea of pilgrimage. I've been really kind of turning that around in my mind. Like what is happening when human beings go on pilgrimage? It's not just well, I think it's probably always been religious, but it's not just confined to what we understand today as religion, right? People have been wandering off into the wilderness for forever. And I personally made myself pilgrimage. So, and I didn't go on a known pilgrimage. I pilgrimaged on my own property. So I live on a very large property, and I have an icon of my patron saint that I put up in the woods. And I would go out to pray there. But I decided that I can't just go, and this is because of my Friedensreich Hundertwasser, the man who hates straight lines. So instead of doing a straight line to Saint Seraphim, I would pilgrimage. And what started happening to me was so incredible because, like you were saying, Annie, the mountains, right? Getting up into the mountains, those are pilgrimages. They are definitely pilgrimages. But what started happening to me was, I don't know if I can talk about it without crying, was that the world of metaphor became alive. It opened up. right before my eyes. I can give you an example. We have a slope on our property, a very steep one, and there are some old growth Douglas fir growing there. And we were really saddened because we had a beetle go through that was killing them all. And so, we used to visit them because they're so old and they had dens underneath of them. And, they were very much alive to us, my husband and I. And I was walking on my way to St. Seraphim and I was taking this long way around, and I came across a place where 4 or 5 of them had all come down in a windstorm. And my first thought was, oh, this is terrible, right? Oh no, they're dead. They're gone. And then I started to look around. I started to attend. And what I saw was that there was all kinds of new growth there. There was birch trees coming, alder trees coming, soapberries were coming, right? I saw moose droppings, and I was like, oh, well, that's because they've let the light in. And then I'm going, they let the light in, and anyway, the whole thing was, as John would say, combinatorially explosive in the best way possible. Okay. So all I wanted to do, I wrote a little thing here when I was listening to you guys talking, and I just wanted to read it. Pilgrimage is about attention. It includes a kind of poverty, which cultivates reliance, which cultivates gratitude. It opens us up to the great invitation. The invitation is an invitation to enter the story that we are in.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. Always with a good reading. Appreciate it. All right. Alex, what say you?
So I love the notion as far as distinguishing a tourist travel versus a pilgrimage. I thought that was quite a profound metaphor. And the one thing is that I will add to that metaphor another picture. So think about the difficulties as far as the human experience and coexisting and putting up with our flaws. So the other metaphor that I want to add to that is a bridge. We want to get to the other side, right? I want to reach out to people. I want to be a better husband, better, fill in the blank, right? We want to get there, but we know that, okay, I'm flawed. I need to build something. That's a metaphor. So there's the bridge. The concept about the bridge, though, that is, and this is a thing that is really hard for the notion to sink in, is that bridges need to be stress tested, because a bridge does no good if it doesn't hold the weight. You want to get to the other side, so you don't want to take shortcuts. You want to be as clear with reality as possible. So truth, I know that's a tricky word, but so you want to be precise. You also have limited funds and time, etc. So what I'm saying is, people, we're complicated, and we're constantly falling flat on our face because we are difficult. We just carry a lot of baggage. So how do we build that bridge that can withstand the weight so that we can be kind? Like, Chad was saying, just don't be, yeah. So we need to be more cordial. So how do we even get there? How do we get to the other side? And so there's 2 words that I want to say to make the long story short. Collaboration, obviously that's simple but harder to do, and then calibration. So those are 2 C words. So to help remember, right? Calibration, collaboration. And the thing about calibrating thing is because I need to be attuned to who it is that I'm talking to, right? If it's my wife versus my coworker versus my boss versus my neighbor, I'm going to have a different sense of reaching them. So what am I saying with this? We're going to be able to adapt and that's easier said than done. How do we adapt to the other person? Because many of us live in a desert, another metaphor, in a desert type of family structure, the Arctic, the jungle, the forest, the city, the farming community. So we all have our normal in our own truth, in our own goals, fears, and can we just get along? Can I really have a conversation with you? How do we grow in this messy thing we call the human experience, right? As a Christian, man, oh man, do I fall flat on my face many times because I heed to pay attention to the message of, you know what I mean? To be a servant instead of trying to be the master. I'm not the master, but yet I fall flat on my face time and time again. Anyways, sorry, that's kind of going long.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Michael Sartori, what say you?
Well, I thought, everything about the conversation was great and touched on many topics that have been near and dear to my heart. And, of course, kind of one of the whole things that got me into this whole space was the fact that, I started working in construction, and somehow that made my spiritual life more clear than when I was working for a church full time. And, kind of got me thinking about with Jesus' parables, they're rooted in such basic processes of human life, like farming and fishing and building and it's not that we've forgotten the spiritual significance of those parables. We aren't as familiar with the mundane half of the metaphor. And so, obviously there's a lot of people that, like I know Matthew Peugeot's talked about, like he's learned more about God from baking bread than, he ever did from studying the books and all that stuff. So, lots of great stuff. I was really disappointed I wouldn't be able to come to the Midwestary, but I did send 12 copies of this book to Chad, and I'm going to just I'm going to send a link or whatever, so anybody that goes in person can at least get the digital copy for free. So as a little more incentive for people to, look forward to that. But yeah. So.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Ups, thank you for the 50 new members. Thank you, Ups, and thanks for wearing the hat. My denim Denny is right over there. So what do you have to contribute, Ups?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Paul, for having this conference. A lot of people miss you and your live streams. This one was particularly enjoyable. And I just wanted to hop in and say hi to everyone. And I'm really looking forward to meet every one of you.
Are you coming?
Yeah, I'm coming. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And also getting the chance to meet many of you for the very first time, including Chad, Green, and even John. So that will be awesome. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ups. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Grim Grizz, your hair's pulled back. You're looking very tame and civilized here. I assume you're...
There was company. There was company. So did you guys figure out what a spirit is?
No, that we'll have to. You'll have to stay tuned, because that's probably where my keynote is going to go. I mean, if you want to know what my keynote is, you just watch what I'm doing on video right now, because I'm working on that.
Well, it's awful suspicious to me that you bring these people on to make estuary, and they end up talking about a pilgrimage, right? As we're all about to pilgrimage to Midwestuary. I was hoping to catch John, because I think he needs to do the Canterbury Tales of the Philosophical Silk Road. I hope he catches that clip. Good to see everybody. I'll see you at the thing.
Do you have a card for the show, Grizz?
Fine. From the Jux deck, the Queen of Clubs.
Queen of Clubs. There we go. Thank you, Grizz. Joshua Morris, first time I've seen your face, I think.
Yeah, this is my first time on here.
Are you coming out of the lurk?
I am coming out of the lurk. This is, I didn't know you just let anybody in here. This is crazy.
I do. I really just let anybody in here. That is true.
Yeah.
So
well,
welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm from Pennsylvania, the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. I grew up like non-denominational Protestant. I'm very grateful for my upbringing. You know, I was brought up in a pretty conservative family. We ate around the dinner table. We went to church every Sunday, and I'm so grateful for that. But then COVID hits, and then a lot of things happen within my family, and I'm thinking I want to become the best man that I can be so that this doesn't happen to my family. I want to become the best Christian that I can be. So I looked more into church history. I was very fond of Jonathan Pageau and listening to the way that he described reality. And I've been listening to him for about 6 years at this point.
Okay.
And through
You don't look old enough to have been able to listen to anything for 6 years. So
yeah, well, I started listening to Jordan Peterson like my junior or senior year of high school. So about 2018.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't
Yep.
have interrupted. Keep going.
No, you're all good. And then that sort of led me towards this more traditional forms of Christianity. So I ended up being baptized Orthodox Christian in 2024. And since then, I've just been paying attention to all these types of conversations. I watch your channel all the time, John Vervaeke, of course, Jonathan Pageau. And now I'm here.
All right. All right. Well, I'm glad you clicked the link. So,
Thank you.
Do you have a question or a statement you'd like to make about the
Yeah, I was just
conversation?
thinking, so we talk a lot about reality being a hierarchy itself. And we're talking about these pilgrimages and we're talking about these small and large worlds. And I was thinking within the context of like the American religion, like people will go and see the Liberty Bell or they'll go and see like George Washington's house, but you won't see them falling to their knees and weeping like a Christian would going to the Jordan River, like a Christian would going to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And that's not to say these things are bad. They're just within the hierarchy of reality. They're just lower pilgrimages. They're smaller worlds. And what I've been trying to do just locally is try and keep encouraging people up that hierarchy towards the higher pilgrimages, towards those larger worlds within their smaller world. So like Peterson talks all the time, start with yourself, clean your own room. And then from that, you can build out. So like within my own experience, I joined the church about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and I just tried to dive in. So I tried to become as part of as many ministries as possible. Maybe too many, and then I have to back off a little bit. But that's what I like to do. I like to dive head first and then figure it out from there. And I think what we need to encourage people to continue doing. Keep looking upwards, keep moving forwards.
That's really wise, Joshua. That's really wise. And you make me think maybe we can't afford to go pilgrimage to where Jesus was baptized. I could return once a year to where I was baptized.
Sure.
Right? And in that way, fractally participate in the broader story.
Yeah, we were just talking at my parish about actually about pilgrimages, and sure, you can't do that, but there are plenty of monasteries all around the United States that you can go visit, and these are little concentrations of that.
Right. And in that way, we ligament the world back together. So I think it's helpful to remember that religion means to re-ligament, to connect all things towards in a coherent whole again. And when I connect through my pilgrimage where I was baptized, in prayer to where Christ was baptized, we are literally weaving and sewing our world back together. And those little things matter. Those they feel small, but they really do bring coherence and meaning and connection and relationship back to our world.
Yeah, and that's, that's something that I found. Of course, this is in other denominations as well, but coming from like a purely evangelical, just like my church, to the Orthodox Church, where they're kind of everywhere. Like I can go anywhere and have the same liturgy and go to coffee hour and talk to the same people about these things that I care about. And like I know what I'm getting myself into, and I feel at home anywhere that I go now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Joshua. Thank you.
Yeah.
Stetson Scott, you got the same stuff behind you as I have behind me.
I know, right? It's you know. Yeah, well, I was like, will that be too matchy? I'm like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fun.
I'm glad you didn't wear a blue shirt. That's
yeah. Well, green's more my color. You can have blue.
All right. All right. Well, what do you have to say, Stetson?
Oh man, my brain is exploding. I could say so many things. We start talking fractals and climbing the mountains, and I'm all the way there. Because many of these were actually painted when I was not all of them, but many, or at least started when I was in the mountains. In a wilderness time for me. So it was sort of like a fractal wilderness, because I was spiritually in a wilderness, and so then. Just to complete the picture, like Annie was saying, well, let's go find my nearest wilderness, and have it be the wilderness, the Lord's wilderness, and of course in my fallen state, it's perhaps a different kind of beast altogether, but in some ways, because it's fractal, it participates right in that higher reality. I wanted to, I wasn't sure. Grimm is gone now, but I was going to ask if he had funded his car repairs to make it to Estuary. Because if not, I was going to auction off the Shadow Cabal painting.
Oh, wow.
So
that's
this
a
is
wild painting.
Yeah, we got like set here with this hypnotic, Oculus in between his horns. This is, these are fallen angels. So, if you want to know what spirit is, it's the indivisible sort of eternal reality that God has given to the dirt, and so that I still am working out the whole the ontology of man. Is it 3 parts? Is it 5? Who knows? Is it only one? But if I think that if it's in parts, and sort of my universalism depends on it being in parts. The spirit is the part that comes from God, which is why it returns to God when it says that the smoke of their anguish rises forever. That's the carbon that's being re-released from the breath of God put into man, and so that is what God redeems by this, because the smoke in the temple is meant to signify the connection between God and his people having a barbecue, right? But it's also meant to be an offering upwards of the spirit of the thing. And so if you guys want to bid on this, you can. Every last proceed, if we pay for Grimm's, whatever, then the rest of it will just go to just to like the donation fund for people for tickets to the thing.
Okay.
So
how can people? You're going to put it on eBay, or you're going to go to
no,
channel,
nothing
or?
so official. So this is really spur of the moment. I didn't, plan to do that. So I was like, well, if we could do it in the chat, but it's getting a little late in the discussion for doing it in the chat. But frankly, if someone just wants to, I don't know, I feel a little presumptuous even doing this, but the spirit.
I think mechanically it's going to be difficult, and I'd
no
you
worries.
to get as much money as possible, because that looks like a really, I think so figure out mechanically how you want to do it, and then contact me, and I'll, maybe we'll put something up on the channel. Don't have a lot of time before Midwestary, but would love to, any of those, to Grizz is getting his car fixed to try and get there. You can go to Grizz's channel and buy him a coffee and that way. But
if someone were to just fund the rest of Grizz or something, and Grizz told me, I would just send it. I'll just get through a back channel their address and send this to them.
All right.
We don't need to maximize profit here. I mean, it is a picture. What are you going to do with bye, Annie? What are you going to do with a picture of demons other than? But you know,
There's someone
many
out there
have,
who wants it. That's for
yeah,
sure.
many artists have painted Lucifer and so on. There's things to be learned. It's in the, you know, we have depictions of the demons and Lucifer in the scriptures. So if it's not too low for the scriptures, I suppose it's not too low for me.
All right.
Yeah, that's all I really wanted to do. And thank you guys, and thank the people who have been on here. So I'm probably just going to duck out if that's all right.
All right. Thank you, Stetson. Mr. Lee, first time of us seeing you. Introduce yourself a little bit.
Hello, Paul. I've been watching you for quite a while now, actually. I think the first time I saw your video was just about 2018, I believe, when during the first rise of John Pearson. So ever since, I mean, to be honest with you, you probably put up 2 videos per day, so it's pretty much impossible to follow up with your speed. But you know, time after time, I would, you know, come around and check out. So this would definitely be the first time I'm hearing the estuary. But I was in Annie's. If you know that Annie have had a class in Jonathan Petro's Circle.
Yep.
Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. I was in that class, and I was very. I found the teaching pretty profound, and I feel obliged to kind of come up here and just to say that there is a certain sense of joy I found in her message and Chad's message, and there's, in my opinion, there's almost what exactly the you know, mentioned in the last chapter of Luke, when Christ revealed himself to the apostles. The apostle realized, hey, aren't our heart heated up when he talked to us on the road?
Yes.
That's exactly how it felt like I felt. So, you know, the connection to C.S. Lewis again brought me, lead me into thinking of Surprised by Joy.
Yes.
And if you went back to Wordsworth's original poem, it goes like this: impatient as wind, I turned to share the transport. Oh, with whom but thee, deep buried in the sun tomb, that spot which no vicissitude can find. And you know, you can see the connection already with Pilgrimage. If I mentioned that part of the poem. So I just want to say that I really appreciate that all of these small clues that we get, all of these small treats, let's call it in the way that we get, they're really part of what's a better way to put it? They're the comforter, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but then we know that we're not abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I want to say. I'm pretty glad that I found you, Chad, because I haven't been watching Paul's video lately, I have to say, and it's definitely a very. I'm surprised by joy finding you today. That's what I can say.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's always a joy to find Chad. It really is. And again, you know, Sam was right. It was a while ago that Chad says to me, I'd really like to do an estuary conference. And I said, well, you're not very far from Chicago. I'm sure you can find some colleagues and some people to join with you. And Chad, you know, if you hadn't had that inkling and followed up with it and really brought it to life, we wouldn't have had this whole conversation today. So, you know, you'd be surprised what you can do if you decide you want to do something. So thank you, Chad. All right, I am going to land the plane. You got any last word for us, Chad?
I was just gonna say it's just telos. It's just whatever they call that. What are they, Theosis or something? I don't know. Yeah. my connection's horrible. I was just going to say the pilgrimage, the American pilgrimage, is to wake up and look at where you're standing. That's what it is, right? I mean, if we don't have any kind of, our actual history is to wake up one day and say, oh my God, I'm oppressed. What are we doing? And so, like, each of us, that's all I want to say. It's weird. Thank you, Paul. Good night. Bye, everybody. Bye.
All right. Sorry, David. I'm landing the plane. I will get you another time. So I think, as I said, you really want to catch Chad's poetry.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with the Messiah complex. A Messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. The hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest. Treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river. Dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us. Baptized in ball pits. A clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers. See what I say. Just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. You think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream. Also in today's community report, Clara, our resident sociologist, had some relevant things to say to the world.
So this is my kitchen. You can even see that there is a fly trap behind me. That's something I would have removed if I had really thought about this, because that is disgusting. Right now I am roasting chicken to eat later today, and I feel like I need to justify that to myself and to the world, like literally to the world, because I'm live streaming.
You've heard your neighbor go on about Jesus. They claim their life is renewed. You're happy for them and wonder about it, but surely that isn't for you. Well, what does it mean, and where does life lead, and what they say, could it be true? Well, open your mind, my friend, you may find that Jesus is calling you to We hear explanations, we try to be patient, opinions the world doesn't lack. They say he's the way, have faith and be safe. It's almost as simple as that. You look for a sign, well this is the time. The answers have come into view. He'll wipe all your tears and cancel your fears. Well, Jesus is calling you to a strong hesitation for great invitation, a feeling we've all felt ourselves. And now we are gathered at life-giving water. It overflows out of the well. Well, he is the man and he has a plan. You're wondering what you should do. I tell you, arise, repent, be baptized, for Jesus is calling you to. Though life won't be perfect, few things will be certain. We follow with all of our hearts. We walk in the light, we can see with our eyes. We understand only in part. We pick up our cross, we don't count our loss. What else is there left to do? The way it is right, his burden is light. Yes, Jesus is calling you to. We all know there's something that's wrong with existence. The nations are warring with blame. But what if I told you a good guy, he loves you, but sin, it has kept us away. There's got to be more, and you can be sure eternity time flies into. But as your days in, you'll still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to. And when your days in, you'll still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to.
Where are you here?
Oh, there I am. Hey.
Where are you? Where?
Got me?
Oh boy. Yeah. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Come on, man.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Yeah.
Walk with my mama.
You walk with my mama.
Walk with me.
Walk with me too.
You walk with my mama.
Yeah.
Walk with me.
And walk with me too.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus journey.
I want Jesus.
Want Jesus.
Walk with me.
Walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. All along this Jesus journey. Hold my hand, Lord. And hold my hand.
Walk with Moses.
You walk with Moses.
Walk with me.
Walk with me.
You walk with Moses. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
While I'm home.
Yeah. Jesus journey.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus to walk with me.
walk with me, Lord. How y'all do it? Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me. Come on, my Theosis. I want Jesus. I want Jesus. Walk with me. To walk with me. Walk with David, a little shepherd boy. Yeah, you made him a great king. I know David shouted for joy. He walked with David, and he's a little shepherd boy. You made him a great king, and David shouted for joy. That's right. Oh, yeah. So walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Gotta walk with me, Lord. Yeah! That was rocking great, brother. Oh, yeah.
Midwestuary 2025, August 22nd through the 24th in Elmhurst, Illinois. A weekend you won't want to miss with special guests Cale Zeldin, Paul Vanderklay, Rod Dreher, Elizabeth Oldfield, John Vervaeke, and Jonathan Pajot. Midwestuary 2025, the Fellowship of the Spirit. Stay tuned for more details. Visit us at midwestuary.com for ongoing updates.